The whispers began long before she entered the room. Soldiers leaned into one another, muttering under their breath, hiding smirks behind calloused hands. Some of the Navy SEALs, broad-shouldered and battle-tested, exchanged glances heavy with doubt. Their eyes lingered on her slight frame, the calmness in her posture, the steady composure that seemed more fitting for a professor than a soldier preparing for a grueling mission. She heard it hollow fragments of derision carried in hushed tones. "She doesn't belong here. She's not strong enough. This isn't for her kind." Captain Eleanor Hayes had long since learned how to let such words slide past her. She had worn the uniform for nearly a decade, enduring every form of skepticism imaginable. She knew that being underestimated could be a powerful weapon if wielded correctly. And today, she intended to prove it. The colonel, a stern man named Whitaker whose face was lined with decades of combat and command, watched her enter the training hall. He had heard the murmurs too. To him, Eleanor was an anomaly in the roster, a special operations officer with a R8 copyright some 8 copyrights more filled with strategic brilliance and survival expertise than sheer muscle and intimidation. Yet it was the mission briefing that had placed her here. The task was monumental, a joint exercise designed to simulate conditions in the harshest terrains, testing not just physical endurance but also mental fortitude, tactical adaptability, and leadership. The Navy SEALs were expected to dominate. It was their home turf. After all, Eleanor was the outlier. The colonel had been skeptical himself, though he'd kept his thoughts guarded. His job was to watch, not interfere. But even he silently questioned if she could truly keep pace. The first phase began with a simple test of strength, hauling weighted packs across a rugged trail. The packs were deliberately overloaded, pressing the soldiers' shoulders and digging into their spines like leaden claws. The SEALs launched forward, their movements aggressive and almost reckless in their determination to assert dominance. Eleanor did not rush. She adjusted her straps with meticulous care, breathed in slowly, and started her steady march. By the first checkpoint, sweat soaked every participant. 2 SEALs had slowed their pace, their lungs protesting the mountain incline. Eleanor, though flushed and weary, pressed on at an unbroken rhythm. She moved like a metronome, deliberate, relentless. By the time they reached the summit, she wasn't first, but she wasn't last either. She had found her balance in the middle of the pack, quiet and determined, a silent answer to the doubts thrown her way. The second phase was worse, underwater navigation in near-freezing currents. The SEALs had trained for years to conquer water. They moved like sharks through the waves, their confidence palpable. Eleanor slipped into the water with a calmness that surprised even Whitaker. He stood at the shore, arms folded, watching. When she resurfaced, gasping but triumphant, he noted the fire in her eyes. She had endured the cold, the pull of the current, the weight of exhaustion, and emerged still resolute. Whispers among the men shifted, some begrudging, some curious. The earlier smirks faded, replaced by narrowed eyes calculating her resolve. No one said it aloud, but the seeds of respect had been sown. The third phase came under darkness. It was a simulated infiltration through thick forests, with every team navigating by compass and intuition. Eleanor's pack moved through the shadows, her instincts honed from years of studying terrain maps and field reconnaissance. When one SEAL grew frustrated and snapped at a wrong turn, it was Eleanor who quietly recalibrated their path. She never barked commands, never sought to prove herself with loud words. Instead, she demonstrated competence, her voice calm, her suggestions sharp. By the time her team reached the objective, even the men who had mocked her limp frame began to look at her with something resembling acknowledgement. But it was the fourth phase that changed everything. A 72-hour endurance march across barren desert was designed to push every human to the brink. The sun was merciless, burning through uniforms, blistering skin. Packs seemed to grow heavier with every mile, boots filled with sand, and thirst clawed at throats. Men stumbled. The medics removed 3 SEALs by helicopter before the first day had ended. Those who remained trudged forward, their pride keeping them upright. Eleanor did not outpace them. She did not sprint or rush. Instead, she conserved her strength, pausing only when absolutely necessary, rationing her water with mathematical precision. When one of the SEALs collapsed from dehydration on the second night, Eleanor offered him her last sip of water before calling for extraction. Her own lips were cracked, her throat dry, but she gave without hesitation. The colonel, observing through binoculars, made note of the gesture. By the third day, exhaustion blurred reality. Some soldiers moved on instinct, eyes half shut, steps uneven. Eleanor, though staggering like the rest, carried herself with a strange dignity. At dusk, when the final stretch appeared, she lifted her chin and pressed forward. Against all expectation, she was among the first 3 to cross the line. The colonel did not move. He simply stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching her. A ripple of silence swept through the men as she removed her pack and let it fall with a thud on the sand. No one mocked her anymore. Their doubt had been scorched away by the desert sun, replaced with reluctant awe. The final test was not physical but tactical, a mock mission that required each group to infiltrate a compound, secure hostages, and extract without detection. Strategy often broke down under fatigue, but Eleanor's mind was razor-sharp even in exhaustion. While others argued over approach, she analyzed blind spots, mapped escape routes, and anticipated obstacles. When the mission began, she led with quiet authority. Her team moved fluidly under her direction, each step calculated, each risk weighed. The extraction was executed with near perfection. When the evaluators reviewed the tapes, Eleanor's group emerged as the only team to succeed without a single casualty. It was then that the colonel stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel as the soldiers assembled. His eyes lingered on Eleanor, and though his expression remained stern, there was an undeniable glint of respect. "They doubted your strength," he said finally, his voice carrying across the ranks. "Hell, even I had my doubts. But strength is not always muscle. It is endurance. It is the will to push forward when the body screams to quit. It is the clarity to lead when others falter." And today his gaze locked on hers, steady and unflinching. "You surpass not just the test, but the very measure of what we thought possible." The silence was heavy, broken only by the desert wind. Eleanor did not smile, did not gloat. She simply stood straighter, the weight of every trial pressing down upon her shoulders. She had not come here to prove herself to the men, or even to the colonel. She had come to prove to herself that she belonged in the ranks of the strongest. But the colonel's words carried weight. The men looked at her differently now, and not as an outsider, not as a question mark, but as one of their own. Perhaps even more than that, the days that followed brought recovery, debriefs, and preparation for real missions. For Eleanor, the memory of pain, exhaustion, and doubt lingered, yet intertwined with it was the undeniable truth. She had endured. She had surpassed the SEALs in more ways than O'Neill, not in raw strength, but in resilience, strategy, and the unyielding will to stand unbroken. When she walked into the mess hall days later, conversations quieted, not in mockery this time, but in respect. Some nodded in her direction. Others simply moved aside to make space for her. The colonel, seated at the head table, gave her the faintest nod of acknowledgement. That, more than any medal or ribbon, was the validation she had earned. For Eleanor Hayes, the whispers no longer mattered. She had silenced them with every step, every breath, every ounce of strength she had summoned from within. And in doing so, she had rewritten the measure of what it meant to be strong.